from the heart of trucker America, my boy Reed Coverdale, host of The Naturalist, capitalist.
This is what government does. It sucks. It is that perfect mixture of inept and conniving.
Some of my closest relationships are now ruined.
If you think you're going to win people over by stating commonplaces, you're just selling the other parts.
If you are just contrarian, you are by default going to be wrong, because they're always going to have some tidbit of truth.
It is about dictating every transaction that you have for the rest of your life.
Libertarians need to get out of New York. They need to get out of California.
Insurrection at Capitol Hill.
That was the beginning of my property.
Coverdale is the guy to be president of the United States.
No one's willing to change anything about themselves to get there.
Well, I'll put a 50 cal attached to my Suburban.
And he died doing what he loved, chasing a minor.
This guy's a fucking murderer.
The gulag is going to be in your house, completely estranged from everything but propaganda. Pearl Harbor was not a surprise, and Saddam did not have nuclear weapons.
Unless you solve the central problem, then we'll be fighting over Mr. Potato Head forever.
He should not be alive. This is unfucking believable.
I've got to get him out of that truck at night and get him into the White House.
Hey guys, thanks for watching The Naturalist Capitalist. I haven't done a live stream Ask Me Anything session for a while. I think it's been a couple months. I was going to try to do it every Saturday night, but that didn't last. I made it like 3 or 4 weeks in a row, and I've been dropping the ball lately, so I just figured I'd do one again since it's been a while. While I'm waiting for everybody to trickle in, I'm going to play the latest ad that we released on the Kaufman campaign. I had a lot of influence in making this ad, and I think it's the best one we've made, and I honestly think it's the best Libertarian Party ad I've ever seen. So I'm going to play it for you guys, see what you think, and then I'll just keep talking, and hopefully more people will trickle in as the stream goes on. So here we go. I'm going to play this ad for you.
6 months ago, I put out a satirical ad saying that war is gay. I'm here to tell you the truth. War is retarded. It's retarded. We're not supposed to say that word, but this is exactly why we need to say it. Because if you support war, you are a retard. We have done this before. This isn't new. Weak, soft, anti-American terrorist sympathizer. These are some of the things that you would have been called for opposing the Iraq War in 2003 or Vietnam in the 1960s. And today, you'll be called similar things for opposing America's involvement in the Ukraine and Russian conflict. Well, you're not. What you actually are is brave. Being anti-war is always unpopular, but it takes people who are willing to stand up and say, no, this isn't our fight. No, we don't need to be involved. And the people who are weak and soft are the people who want to steal from you to get us involved in a conflict we have no business in. The war on poverty was won by poverty. The war on drugs was won by drugs. The war on Afghanistan was won by goat herders with an average income of $500 per year. Don Bolduc and Maggie Hassan want us to fight China and Russia simultaneously.
What boggles my mind, Steve, is the fact that we haven't gone all in on this already. Diplomatically, informationally, militarily, and economically.
Everything's on the table when it comes to keeping our country safe. And what we've seen from Russia in particular recently...
And we can't take any pressure off China either. We got to go after China because they're in this with them.
Maggie Hassan and Don Bolduc want to take your money so that your children can die and America can be hurt. This November, be brave, be anti-war, be a libertarian. I'm Jeremy Kaufman, and I'm serious.
So there you go. That's our latest ad. We filmed it a couple weeks ago. It was just me, Justin O'Donnell, and Jeremy Kaufman sitting in a room with a green screen, and we just I came up with some basic outline thoughts and just threw them at Jeremy, and he just spitballed, and then we sent it over to Dan Smots, and that's what we got. So great ad. I just dropped a link to it in the description, or in the live stream chat. So if you're watching this live, if you could share that with everyone you can. It's already gotten about 100,000 views on Twitter. It's on Jeremy Kaufman's homepage. It's also LP New Hampshire's shared it a lot. So please share that thing around. Help us get maximum exposure over the next 2 weeks. 2 weeks from today is the election, and he's the only anti-war candidate. And to me, this is the most important issue in general, but especially right now. I mean, the stakes are really high right now. And I would honestly vote for either of the other two candidates if they had a strong position on this, but neither of them do. They're both bad. So neither of them are going to get my vote. So yeah, 2 weeks from the election coming right up here. We're going to be protesting on Thursday outside of the debate because they're not letting Jeremy Kaufman in. So we're going to try to gain some attention somehow. Also, Don Bolduc, he was supposed to come on the show. I'll talk about that a little bit. So I went to a few of his events, and the campaign manager and the political director and some other guy knew who I was, or knew I wasn't there as a supporter or something. And so at the third event I went to, they pulled me out of line and said, "Hey, why are you here? Are you going to cause a scene? Like, what are you doing?" And I said, "No, I'm just here to ask a question because I tried to get Don on my show a few weeks back, and I just got a call from the media team saying that there's not going to be time for him to come on my show." Now, whether it's really just that they don't have time, which I do believe, by the way, that they are strapped for time. I mean, this was 3 weeks before the election at the time. They also probably didn't really want him coming on my show if they figured out who I was, because I was going to ask him some tough questions. So I told them, look, I can't get him on my show, so I'm just here to ask him directly at a town hall. And they said, "Well, look, we'll get him on your show for you if you don't go in there," basically, is what they said, because they were afraid I was going to cause a scene, even though I'd already been to. I'd actually been to 4. This was my 4th event because I'd been to one a couple weeks earlier where I'd met Don's wife and been very cordial to her. And she's actually the one who set me up with the media team. But that obviously wasn't going to happen. So I was just there to ask him questions directly. And they basically said, "Look, we know he's super busy, but we can get him on your show." And so I said, "All right, if this can really happen, I'll just leave and won't go in or ask questions or do anything." And I'd driven all the way up to Conway, which is way up in northern New Hampshire. It's about 3 hours from where I live. So it was no small investment to go all the way up there. I had to get a hotel overnight because I was just too far to drive back. But anyway, I went through all that, and I got the political director's phone number, and we exchanged information, and he did follow up with me for the first few days, and then nothing happened. The media team never got in contact with me. So yesterday was a week since I'd had that altercation with them, and so I texted him again, and I said, "Hey, let's just be real. This isn't going to happen, is it?" And he said, "Well, I'm not the comms person, but I don't know. I mean, they are super busy or whatever." And I said, "Okay, well, what if I just give you a question for him? Can he answer it?" And he said, "Yes, that's fine. Why don't you just send me a question?" So this is the question I emailed. I haven't gotten a response yet. But I said, "On February 28th, directly after the invasion of Ukraine, you said that we should go all in on Ukraine, militarily, economically, and advocated for putting special forces and CIA troops on the ground. You then said that we should go after China so they don't take Taiwan. These statements were so hawkish that Corey Lewandowski said it disqualified you from ever being a United States senator. Also, Pentagon correspondent Jennifer Griffin said, to suggest that the U.S. would put an indirect fire or special operations or CIA on the ground to give Putin any excuse to broaden this conflict is extremely dangerous talk at a time like this. Your website also says that you believe we should go after rogue nations like Iran and North Korea. And though you claim to have supported the withdrawal from Afghanistan, when the time came, you buckled and said it was wishful thinking to say we could leave, even though Biden's deadline was pushed back from Trump's deadline by 5 months. So my question to you is, why should I trust you as a general with military experience who can't claim lack of preparedness or lack of knowledge not to lead this country into more stupid wars? So I'm still waiting on a reply from that question, but it has been put to him. So we'll see what he has to say. But in my mind, he's already disqualified himself, because when it mattered, when a conflict was kicking off, he was like, let's go, let's go, let's go, let's show him. I'm actually going to pull that clip up because it's worth showing you guys, just in case you haven't seen it. Been trying to blast it out everywhere, so lots of you guys watching have probably already seen it, but I'll pull it up again. This is on my Instagram. It's also on Jeremy Kaufman's Instagram, LP New Hampshire's Instagram. It's been posted by LP New Hampshire on Twitter probably a dozen times or more by now. We're just trying to get the awareness out there that this is what he said. So let me just play this for you here. I'll share the screen real quick. Share. All right. Here we go. I'm going to play this. This is what Don Bolduc said on February 28th, right after Putin started invading eastern Ukraine.
It's this resistance that's going to win. But what boggles my mind, Steve, is the fact that we haven't gone all in on this already. Diplomatically, informationally, militarily, and economically. This is not a time for pause right now. We need to get in there and we need to help them on the ground.
We need to get in there and we need to help them on the ground.
We have columns of his troops lined up, ready to be, interdicted.
We have columns of his troops, and he means Putin's. We've got columns of Putin's troops lined up, ready to be interdicted. That means ready to be airstriked. So he wanted to attack Russian columns of tanks, artillery, infantry.
And we need to give that kind of help to the Ukrainians. But we're just sitting back and we're not doing anything. And we're just saying, everything is on the table. Well, now's the time. Putin is a global threat. He is an enemy to the world. And that's what we have to start telling people he is. And we can't take any pressure off China either. We got to go after China because they're in this with them. And we don't want them going into Taiwan. So this is huge. And we got to come.
So China had nothing to do with the conversation here. I'm going to add myself back in here. There we go. So China had nothing to do with the conversation at all. And he just threw it in there like, oh, yeah, by the way, also, we need to go after China because they're in this with Russia and we got to stop them from going into Taiwan. Again, nothing to do with this conversation, but he just had to throw it in there. Let's keep watching.
Together, we got to lead the world in supporting President Zelensky. And
we got to lead the world in supporting President Zelensky. Why? We don't have to lead the world in in helping President Zelensky. That is being the policeman of the world. We absolutely do not have to do that. But that's what
supporting the Ukrainians. And what we have been doing now is just standing by. There is more to do. We can do it, and we should be doing it.
So basically, his criticism of Biden at this time is that Joe Biden isn't doing enough. He's just sitting back and letting Putin be a brutal dictator, not doing enough to get in his way. So that's his problem, mainly.
Be really clear what you mean there. Again, limited time, so I'm sure it can't be an exhaustive answer.
Right.
But what specifically, you're not talking about American troops. I think everyone's agreed about that. How can we help specifically?
No.
What should we do that we're not doing?
We have indirect fires. Oh, sure, Steve. We have indirect fires. We have indirect capabilities. So does NATO. We have all kinds of things that we can be helping with without having to put ground troops in there. And that's what he's asking for. And we have to get more stuff in there. And we have to get more combat help in there. We can do that. I know we can do it. I've seen it done before.
Sorry to interrupt. What is combat? I'm sorry to interrupt you. What is combat help? Just so everyone's clear what you mean. That's not troops.
Sure. You got to get the resistance, the stuff that they need. But more importantly, we're going to have to help this resistance out. And I talked about this earlier with General Kellogg on Fox and Friends on an earlier program about CIA findings and about using special operations troops. It's this resistance that's going to win. But
all right, so there's the clip. So for more info on that, you can go watch an episode I recently did discussing Tulsi Gabbard's endorsement of Don Bolduc. And she didn't just endorse him, but she came here to New Hampshire and was campaigning for him. So I think that's episode 262. You can look at that, and it has more in-depth analysis of what Don Bolduc believes. But he was upset when we were leaving Afghanistan, and on his website it says that he supported the withdrawal, but it was like theoretically he supported it, but when it came time to actually leave, he wanted to stay. And it wasn't just saying like, oh, this is not being executed well. It was in 2013 and 2014, I said that going from a military to a non-military strategy was a mistake. So it's typical. Like, you have so many people say that type of stuff. Oh, I oppose forever wars, but when it comes time to do something, you don't actually try to, bring an end to the war. So let's see. We got question. Thoughts on the Tulsi Gabbard Ron Paul interview? I haven't watched it yet. I saw that he was her third guest on her new podcast, so I definitely will watch that episode. I know they're very friendly, and Ron is a big fan of Tulsi. He had her on his podcast when she was running for president as a Democrat, and basically told her that he hopes she does really well. And there were a lot of libertarians in New Hampshire supporting her. So and Ron was also good friends with Dennis Kucinich, who endorsed Tulsi Gabbard in 2020 and came here to New Hampshire. I actually got to meet him when he was here. So yeah, I'm not surprised at all that she had him on the show. I will definitely watch it, and I'll get back to you on that. Thoughts on Adidas versus Ye? So yeah, I just saw something about this. Adidas, I didn't even read the story. I just saw a headline, something about how they're not going to. Let me just look it up. I forget what it was. I saw something about it. Because of his comments, and they're gonna stop promoting something. Let me see what it says. Okay, so Adidas terminated their partnership with Ye after his remarks. I don't know. I'm not too surprised, I guess. At all. Do you miss Utah? I do sometimes. Utah is great. It's very different than New Hampshire. I miss the sunrise in the desert, waking up, starting the truck up, driving across barren plains. It's kind of cool. I really like the desert. I like the mountains out there. There's certainly aspects of it I miss. I miss being in the truck. Sometimes I really like that job. I'm going to start working here soon. I've actually got a job offer that I don't think I'm going to turn down. It's a pretty good deal, so I will be working again soon. How did you first come across Ryan Dawson? You were my introduction to his work. I forget if it was 2015 or 2016. I think it was 2016. Yeah, it was 2016. So I was a Rand Paul supporter in 2016. And when Rand Paul dropped out, Donald Trump was just too much for me. Like, I had considered him really early on, but then the more I heard him talk, I was just like, yeah, I can't really get behind this guy. So Bernie sounded like he was anti-war and pro-civil liberties, kind of like a Tulsi Gabbard type figure, is what I thought. So I was like, maybe I'll check this guy out. And support him in the primary against Hillary. And I already voted in in February, so it didn't matter. So I couldn't actually vote again, but thought about like vocally supporting him or endorsing him or whatever. Not that it really mattered because I wasn't an influencer of any sort, but talking to my friends or whatever, I would have been like, okay, maybe this Bernie guy. And I came across this video called Bernie Sanders to the Woodshed, and it was by Ryan. And he was basically just exposing how pro-war and pro-corporatism and what a sellout hack Bernie Sanders was. And that just completely opened my eyes to the fact that he was not an ally of any sort. So, and that's why to this day, it still pisses me off that people don't realize that Bernie is just a hack. You know, a lot of libertarians just criticize him because he wants Medicare for all or gun control or something. And it's like, okay, yeah, that's bad too. But the worst thing is he's just a total sheepdog leading the lambs to slaughter. I mean, he doesn't stand for anything except the Democrat Party at the end of the day. And that has become exceedingly obvious with his endorsement of Hillary Clinton and then, you know, campaigning for her heavily. And then the same with Joe Biden, and then voting for the $40 billion to Ukraine. I mean, he's just awful. He's terrible. So I wasn't surprised by that. And people keep asking, like, what did he sell out? And it's like, well, he's always been a sellout. So you can't like suddenly sell out if you're a hack, if you're a fraud the whole time. Like it's not like he had any character and then just decided to give up on it. This is who this guy is. So that's how I found out about Ryan. I just got a job delivering parts for 4 different quarries 3 weeks ago, and I already got a ticket for passing a bus. Oh, geez. What type of truck you driving? Tractor trailer or just straight truck? Just drop it in the comment. How did Shane get into the debate? Apparently they didn't have, I forget if it's the Daily Sun or some fucking platform. I forget what platform held the debates, but they didn't have polling requirements like they do for us up here in New Hampshire on that specific debate platform. I think there are going to be other debates that Shane might not be in, but that one, it was just if you made it on the ballot, which is what it should be anyway. But yeah, I guess they don't have to deal with the bullshit like we do. Do you believe Tulsi had a change of heart on 2A, or is she just pandering? So I don't really believe she has a position on it at all. I mean, maybe a little bit. Like, I think this is one of those issues that she literally just doesn't care about. And I think she probably strongly believes that you should be allowed to own handguns for self-protection. I mean, that's something that she's been pretty consistent on. She even like in her ultra progressive Bernie days, she bucked the party line and voted a couple times with the Republicans for self-defense. When it comes to like assault weapons and the Second Amendment being to put a powerful government in check, I don't think she has a strong conviction either way. So I don't think she's like a gun grabber who wants to disarm everybody, but at the same time, I don't think she's a staunch Second Amendment supporter who really, you know, strongly believes that we should all own AR-15s. Like, I think to her, it's one of those partisan issues that she'll just take whatever position she has to on, personally. So I don't know. I never thought she was like a Beto O'Rourke style Democrat, but I don't believe she's suddenly a staunch supporter of it either. I think it's just one of those issues that she really just doesn't care about that much. Ronwell, read my child star. Julian Hilliard liked my Halloween costume. I met Amash and got to ask him for you in 2022 state gala convention. Any thoughts on those, such as my question to Amash for you? I saw you posted that in the Telegram chat. That was great. And he said he would have to talk to me about it. So if I ever see him, I'll talk to him. But the email that I got to send to Amash to ask him on my show from him. So when I had Twitter, I DM'd him once and said, hey, would you come on my show? And he said, absolutely, just email this address. And so I emailed the address. I've done it several times, just never heard anything back. I still like Justin Amash. I think he's a good guy. Obviously we have differences on messaging style and then I would say some priorities too. But I mean, if you lined us up on what we agree on, it's just about everything. So I still personally like the guy. I have met him once, but didn't really talk to him. Just very briefly met him at the convention. Kevin K, my guess is neither of those. In some ways, I think she's a centrist who genuinely believes in representative democracy, and as such believes it's her duty to give the people what they want. So that's replying to the question about the Second Amendment from Kevin about Tulsi, which is kind of what I said. Like, I basically agree with what Jose is saying here. I don't think this is an issue that she really cares about. The other thing is, I do think she really does care about a few things, and I think I think she is a genuine person who does have some core values, but she doesn't have any political principles or any that can be pinned down. So she would always say, I want what's best for the American people. And I do believe her that that's what she wants. But the problem with a statement like that is, okay, so what's off limits? How do you decide what is best for the American people? Is this a decision that's solely up to you? What if vaccine mandates are best for the American people? What if an assault weapons ban is best for the American people? What if going into nuclear war with Russia is best for the American people? Like, it's completely subjective. If you believe in property rights and non-aggression, like Ron Paul does, then you can actually cement your views with something that you can stand on and defend. But in my mind, she doesn't really do that. I'm fully intending to ask her about this when she comes on the show. Like, what are your values and what dictates your decision? You know, how do you know when something is morally correct or not? She's also a very religious person, so I'd say that guides her in some way, but we've seen her kind of flip on like really big issues every now and then, and sometimes it seems politically advantageous, and then other times it's just confusing. So I don't know. I don't think she has a philosophy that really guides her decision making. Ryan's woodshed videos are great. Thanks for the answer. Do any politicians have character? Jeremy Kauffman does. Vote for Jeremy Kauffman on November 8th. Adam Fitzgerald, with the elections upcoming, what are your thoughts regarding the looming change over to a Republican House and Senate and the potential for two conflicts, China and Iran? Yeah, I don't really buy, I'll just leave that up. I don't really buy the narrative that the Republicans have become anti-interventionist or even more anti-interventionist. They're just different. You know, they have different conflicts that they advocate for, and they're arguably worse now. So Republicans maybe don't want to fight in Afghanistan or Iraq anymore, but now they want to fight with Iran and China. You know, I don't think that's an upgrade. I think that's crazy. And the Democrats have obviously, you know, gone nuts too. I mean, they want war with Russia, although 30 House Democrats have urged Biden to sit down at the table with Putin, which is good. Like, it's not enough, but it's good. It's good that that's happening. So hopefully the popular tides on this bullshit are starting to shift. Yeah, I mean, I don't necessarily see an upgrade in our government coming. Austin Peterson made a good point on my show today that when there's a Democrat president and a Republican Congress, that's when things are gridlocked the most and there's the least amount of progress. So, and progress being a bad thing. And I tend to agree with them on that. So hopefully if the House and Senate are taken by the Republicans, which I imagine they will be, hopefully nothing gets done. So if you have a Republican president and Republican Congress and Senate, forget it. I mean, it's out the window. Spending is crazy. Everything will be approved. But if you have a Democrat president, Republican controlled Congress and Senate, they won't approve anything that he would want to sign into law. So it stops things up and creates more partisanship, which I think is good. Everyone's always complaining about partisanship, but partisanship is the only thing keeping this country from falling apart. So, you know, I'm all for partisanship. So I envision that will happen. And I do think you're right that the China mongering, and I don't even see that as a strictly Republican thing. I mean, even progressives are awful on China. And then obviously your generic Democrat is awful on, I mean, look at Nancy Pelosi. So, yeah, I think China is the next big thing, which is why I've been cautioning people about supporting people who are just opposed to conflict with Russia, because it's just going to be a bait and switch and we're just going to go for China instead. And things are heating up over there. I mean, it's not good. So that could be the next thing to pop off. And if you have a guy like Don Bolduc in the Senate when tensions are hot with China, I mean, that's just the worst thing imaginable. And then most of the Republicans who are kind of good on Ukraine and Russia, they're just awful on China. They're worse than like the establishment Republicans are. So I don't think that's good. But I think Tom Woods says, no matter who you vote for, you end up with John McCain. Seems to be true. Jose Gallison says, and her opinion on what the people want has likely changed due to the experience with those that think otherwise. Agreed. Like, I think running for president actually probably legitimately changed her mind on a couple things, because she was in this echo chamber in Hawaii. And when you start campaigning in Iowa and New Hampshire and getting to know all these people from a different, area than just your Aloha Island out there, your perspective is probably broadened. So I think that also plays a role. Amash had no problem using the power of the federal government to go after Trump. Don't like the dude. That's a completely fair opinion. I think that is the biggest stain on his legacy, to be honest. I think he really threw a lot out the window because he had so many really good, valid criticisms of Trump when it came to foreign policy, when it came to spending. Rand Paul, it was really annoying because Rand was pretty good on most of the issues with his voting record, but then rhetorically he was like saying Trump was great and we all got to vote for him if we want to end the wars and have, criminal justice reform, blah, blah, blah. But then Trump, he voted against Trump, I think, more than any other Republican senator did, where Amash had like really good criticisms of Trump, but he kind of watered it down by going all in on the Russiagate and Ukrainegate stuff. On Russiagate, I think he says like he doesn't think Donald Trump colluded with Russia or that he's a traitor or any of the stuff surrounding the election being stolen is true. I don't believe Amash thinks any of that is true. He went after Trump based on obstruction of justice, which I also think is kind of dumb, but it is a little bit of a nuanced position. But I do think he sacrificed a lot of the high ground by jumping aboard all that stuff. What percentage of the vote does Kaufman need to get into the debates and to catch traction? Well, I think it's too late. They wanted 7%, and they said in an independently conducted poll, and so we tried to ask more questions about like what does that mean, but they wouldn't give us a lot of answers, and it was down to like one guy barring us from entering the debates. And so we shared his phone number and his email address online to try to get everyone to harass him, and we weren't doxing him. This was public information, but we were sharing it to try to get people to call him and say, hey dude, what the hell? But he hasn't budged, so apparently those restrictions are holding true and Jeremy won't be in the debate. If I'm elected as a delegate in 2024, I would have my child star congratulate me, and I would nominate Dave Smith, Justin Amash for 2024 LP presidential ticket that has bold message and mass appeal. Yeah, I would certainly support that ticket. I don't know if Justin Amash would do vice president though. On the scale of 10 to 10, how racist are you? Definitely an 11. I'm also like 50-50 on whether Tulsi is straight up controlled opposition. Hard to discern between that and a true believer. I think that's fair. She hasn't she's given unsatisfactory answers regarding the World Economic Forum ties. So she says, you always see that picture shared of her and Crenshaw and a few other people on the World Economic Forum's Global Young Leaders Initiative or whatever. And that's the image that's always shared. And then she did answer to that saying that they used my picture without my permission. But then there's another tweet that's still up where she's thanking the WEF for nominating her as a young global leader. So those two things don't add up. Which was it? Did you did you thank them for congratulating you, or did they use your picture without asking your information, asking your permission? So I don't know. That is something I intend to ask her about when she's on the show. Let's see. Is Jeremy going to pay to air the new retard ad on cable TV? Yeah, we're talking about that. I don't know if it can. I think you could get that on TV. I don't know if the retard word excludes it from TV ads or not. During the debate, there you go. That's a good idea. Is Jeremy going to have the new retard ad on cable TV the night of the debate? Same question. That's a great idea. I don't know why we haven't thought of that. Maybe I'll suggest that, but I don't know what the time restriction is on like how far ahead of time we can get it out, but we are planning on broadcasting it. Why are you so beautiful? Well, you see, I'm created in the image of Yahweh, and why wouldn't I be beautiful, Daniel? I mean, this is supposed to be down your alley. Lots of people I talked to about Tulsi bringing up the World Economic Forum. She really needs to answer that. Sure. I think it's a fair question for people to ask. And I don't know a ton about like the young global leaders choosing you, like what that means, if that's something you have to take part in, or if they just like, I don't know. So, I will research that a little bit more once I actually know that she's going to be coming on. So just in case anyone missed this, like she told me she'd come on the show like last April or something, April of 2021. And she did say at the time, I have no idea when we'll be able to do this, but I promise you it will happen. And so I thought like, okay, 6-7 months maybe. But then, the whole year went by, and then they finally did get in contact with me in, I think, September of last year. Her secretary called me and said, all right, hey, we just want to get your information and know about the podcast and see if we can get her on. So I figured it was going to happen soon after that, because Tulsi was in Africa. She was deployed, and then she came back. So I figured after she came back, it was going to happen, but then just radio silence. And I'd send a text once a month, and I'd get the same response every time. Tulsi's not doing podcast appearances right now. I did this all the way until like January, and then I stopped for a few months. And then I think in March, I started like a harassment campaign. So I started sharing a clip of me and Dave Smith on a podcast where Dave is saying it's finally time to go on Reed show, Tulsi, just do it, and shared it on Twitter, and it got like thousands of likes and retweets and comments, and there's no way that they didn't see it. But so I tried that for like 2 or 3 weeks and didn't go anywhere. So then I gave up again, and then I finally just texted them back a couple of weeks ago and said, hey, I haven't bothered you for months, so I'm just wondering what's going on. And I saw that Tulsi put out a gun video where she's shooting an AR-15. So if she's going to change her views on the Second Amendment, then if there's any podcast she should go on, then it's mine. And then I actually got a response. Okay, I'll pass this on to her. She is going to start doing her podcast soon, and she's going to be going on other podcasts. And I was like, oh, wow, soon, because, the podcast had been advertised since January of 2021. So I was like, okay, I have no idea what soon means. But sure enough, a few days later, she released her first episode where she said she's leaving the Democrat Party, and then she did start going on other people's podcasts. So apparently that is happening. So I don't know, could be sometime soon, but I have no idea if that means before the end of the year or if this means like next spring or what. So don't give your hopes up on this happening soon. But progress is slowly being made. So I'll keep you guys updated on that. Thoughts on the CDC's vaccine schedule recommendation? I haven't looked into this. I saw something about how they're going to be requiring it for people to go to public school, I think. I haven't read into it too much. So don't have a great answer on that one. Sorry. Let's just look it up. So I got the CDC pulled up here, and it's saying that child and adolescent schedule, recommended vaccination schedules for ages 18 or younger. And so then they give you a schedule for how to get it. I think this is stupid. I'm amazed they're still pushing this, to be honest. Here, I'll just share the screen so you guys know what I'm looking at. So they've got the different schedules for dependent on how old you are. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I don't know if this will change. I mean, I'd like to think if the Republicans get in there and clean house, and then if we get a Republican president or something who can make different appointments to head different bureaucracies, that some of this would go away. But I'm not sure that's the case. I mean, the Republicans haven't even gotten rid of Obamacare. They never do anything. So I'm not sure that'll happen. Yeah, it is. Yeah, that's it. I just don't understand how they can recommend it unanimously with the amount of evidence that it causes harm to most people, especially children. Yeah, so my brothers ended up getting vaccinated, and my brothers are both younger than I am. And they did it because it looked like their job was going to force them to get it. And then whatever, their choice. But then after they got the first dose, I told them, don't do this again, guys. And this was like a year ago right now. And I said, I don't care as much about older people getting it, but the data, even at the time, was showing that young men under 30 were at the highest risk of side effects from the vaccine. And the risks from the vaccine were almost equal to the risks of COVID. So like, why bother getting it, So even a year ago, I was heavily advising young men to not get vaccinated. So I think especially now, you're even more crazy to do it. That's precisely what's being recommended. It would remove all liability, from what I'm told. Yeah, again, I don't know. I haven't looked into this enough. I know this just happened in the last few days. I'll look into it more and give a more in-depth answer when I can. What do you think motivated the CDC decision? I'm sure it's just money. It's corporatism. These corporations can get a guaranteed flow of money if it's required that you get this vaccine. I don't know if it's true, but I think it was RFK that said once it's approved for under 18, the pharma companies maintain liability protection. Otherwise, it lapses once the EUA expires. Gotcha. Well, I need to look more into this. I know this is something that came out in the last few days. So this has always been my position on this type of stuff. I am not a physician. I'm not a doctor. So you should not take health advice from this show. I don't have any unique perspective that is going to be better than somebody else. All I've ever done is looked at the data and it's been from the CDC in the past. The reason I decided not to get vaccinated was because of CDC data. I went online and they had this thing at least a year ago where you could put your height, weight, age, and health side effects into a system to figure out what likelihood you would be hospitalized if you caught COVID. and I was at less than 1%. Now, if I got vaccinated, it brought it from like 0.7% down to like 0.01%. So I'm technically 70 times more likely to get hospitalized without being vaccinated, but it's from 0.01% to 0.7%. So the media was blasting this out like, you are putting yourself at 70 times more risk if you don't get vaccinated. And it's like, okay, that's technically true, but that's not framing this in an honest way. If you look at the data, like, yeah, it's from less than 1% to a tiny fraction of 1%. That's the difference here. It's not whatever it is you're trying to make it out to be. So that was always my pushback against, I was always against the mandates. You can go back, watch the videos when this thing was first being, when this thing was first being recommended, or when they were first talking about having like some sort of vaccine mandate, I think in like March of 2021, I did a live stream with David Fight and Will Fight. I remember talking about it, and I did several different live streams about it following up. I think I did one with Dave Smith and Clint and Jeremy Todd when Joe Biden was getting extra authoritarian on it in August or September of last year. I've done a bunch of different episodes about it, and it was always against the mandates, but I always was pretty agnostic about the health effects. But I mean, none of this is surprising. They lie about just about everything. I would never claim to be a dietitian of any sort, but they've lied like with the food pyramid, or was saying that animal fats are more harmful than sugar is, or, whatever. Like there's been tons of things that they lie about, and I'm not an expert who can give you better health advice, but you can just look at the facts and realize that they lie to you a lot of the time. So I take a similar stance with all this COVID stuff, all this fucking vaccine bullshit. Just look at the stats that they're actually putting out and decide if you really want to do something, because a lot of the time they are telling you the relative truth, but the media will frame it in a way that's really, really dishonest. But if you just go and actually look at the statistics, you can make educated decisions yourself. That's what I did. That's why I never got a COVID vaccine. And it was all because of the official sources, the information they were putting out, not listening to MSNBC, not listening to Rachel Maddow or some, CNN anchor or whatever. Just go directly to the source, look at the facts that they're printing out, and you can make a pretty educated decision. You don't even need to listen to alternative platforms or people who are getting banned. And what was weird is they would still recommend that I get it. Like the CDC was telling me I should get vaccinated, but then if you just look at the numbers, it's like, why would I bother? That's just insane. So that is why I never got vaccinated. Let's see here. The Republicans seem so ineffective. What happened? I don't know. I don't think anything happened. I mean, so there was the Tea Party movement, which initially sounded like a small government surge. And there was the anti-Iraq war movement on the left, which seemed sort of anti-war. But people only remember like a decade ago or 2 decades ago with the Republicans and Democrats. If you look historically, the Democrats have never been anti-war and the Republicans have never been fiscal conservatives. That's just bullshit. I mean, it just is. Like, Reagan was not a conservative. He was not a fiscal conservative. Carter was more fiscally conservative than Reagan was. Rand Paul, before he kind of sold out to the Republicans, he actually made this point when he was campaigning for Senate in 2010 and caught a lot of flack for it. And then the Democrats have never been anti-war. They got us into World War I, World War II, Korea, Vietnam, Kosovo, Libya, Syria, Yemen. I mean, they're not anti-war. They never have been. They were anti-George W. Bush, and they were anti-draft for a short time in the 60s. But other than that, They really have never been staunch anti-war people. There's like pockets of it, just like there's pockets of fiscal conservatism on the right, but they didn't just throw everything out the window. They've never actually stood for the things they actually say they stand for. So I don't think this is some sort of new phenomenon. I think it's been like this for a long time. The Last American Vagabond had been covering this extensively. Great objective journalism. Yeah, I know. I think he got banned off of Twitter a couple times, maybe. I think he got censored quite a bit. Let's see. The pharmaceutical industry owns the media and the politicians. Yes, they do. I'm not vaccinated either. COVID really is an odd virus in how it affects certain people. I have asthma, caught COVID in September of 21. I was fine except for a gnarly sore throat. Yeah, see, my boss, he almost died from it. My former boss, the guy I worked for out in Utah, he got it really, really bad, and he was in the hospital for a month. Had a chest tube, collapsed lung. So, I mean, it can really, it's not like it was a fake thing that couldn't fuck you up. It certainly could have. And this was what drove me crazy is while my boss was like gasping for air in the hospital, I was telling people don't, get the vaccine unless you really think you should. Like, read the data. The data's laid out right here. To me, it's obvious I don't need it, but make your own informed decision. And I was being called a virus denier by people while my boss was dying of COVID in the hospital. So it's just kind of funny how that all works out. Like you get accused of being something that's just absolutely ridiculous. This is just my hypothetical question. Let's say Dave Smith won the presidency in 2024. Would you be surprised if he won the presidency? I don't think surprised is the right word. I would be absolutely aghast and amazed. Like I just, I can't even process that. I mean, the chances of that are, it's just ridiculously minuscule. But yeah, I mean, so yes, I would be surprised if he won the presidency. I think if I had to guess right now, I'm making my prediction. I think I've made this on the show before, but I think Ron DeSantis will be the next president of the United States. I hope that there's like a really bloody, vicious primary between him and Trump just for the entertainment factor. But I think if that happens, people will ultimately choose DeSantis because Trump is just really problematic. And I actually slightly prefer Trump to DeSantis because I think Trump can be weaponized for liberty in a better way just because he's such a self-absorbed, egotistical, megalomaniac. So he doesn't do things in a methodical way. He has no, it's kind of like Tulsi, but different. Like I was saying, Tulsi is kind of unpredictable because she doesn't have like a set of moral values that tie her down. Trump's only set of moral values is what is best for Trump. And he can be tricked because he was tricked into doing things that were not best for Trump. But that is like his operating principle. What's going to make me look good? And I think it's easier to weaponize that than it is going to be to weaponize Ron DeSantis, because I do think Ron DeSantis is a legitimate imperialist Zionist. I think he really believes in like national security through peace through strength. I think basically all those generic tropes are things that Ron DeSantis really believes in. Where Trump, I don't think he necessarily believed in any of it. He was just kind of convinced that he had to do it. And he hasn't shown me that he's learned his lesson at all. Trump hasn't. I mean, he endorsed Dr. Oz. I even after getting raided by the FBI and everything, I don't necessarily think that he is smartened up, but I still think, regardless of all that he would be easier to use as a wrecking ball than DeSantis would. All that aside, I think DeSantis will beat him in a primary just because I don't think Trump's haymakers are going to land with DeSantis. DeSantis is a different breed. He's a lot like Trump, but he's Trump without the side effects, Trump without the drawbacks, Trump without the temper tantrums, without the, he's also smarter than Trump. He's more well-read. He knows everything he needs to know. Trump is kind of a bumbling idiot, where you don't really have that with DeSantis. So I think DeSantis would be a formidable foe for the Democrats. I think he would beat Trump, and then I think he would easily beat Biden if Biden is the guy again. I hear a lot of people asking, like, what do you think about Tulsi as the vice presidential candidate? I mean, I wouldn't like to see it, but that ticket, if you had DeSantis Gabbard, I think it would win 40 states. I mean, you got two young veterans who are well-spoken and seem, in a lot of ways to represent the average American who's upset with how things are going now. They're two people that they can look up to, and it would absolutely sweep the election. Trump's talking about death penalty for drug dealers, praising China's policies. Yeah, see, this is the other thing with Trump is he doesn't have a finger on the pulse. Bringing the Johnson & Johnson executives onto the stage and still talking about his vaccine that saved, millions of people, that stopped the Spanish flu 2.0 from happening. I mean, he just doesn't get it. He doesn't understand that is not the thing to be pushing right now, where I think Ron DeSantis has his finger on the pulse a lot more. So I just think Ron is such a stronger candidate in general. Trump, DeSantis, Pence, and Pompeo primary would be highly entertaining. I'm here for it. I want to see it. I want to see it big time. That'd be great. Let's see. Ron is perfect in the governor's seat. I prefer him in the governor's seat. I'll tell you that much. I think he would. I've written a Substack article about Ron DeSantis. If you guys go to my Substack, and read it, I basically compare Ron DeSantis to Barack Obama. I prefer Obama in the Senate to Obama in the White House. That's for sure. And I feel the same way about DeSantis. I think there's a bit of an overhyped glorification for DeSantis going on. Like, even on the stuff that he's supposedly good on, he's not that good. I think other people were better than him. I think he's just a creation of the media for the most part. Like, it's almost like, I don't know if he's intentionally controlled opposition to garner this huge following and then sell everybody out, but he's the perfect guy for it if that's not what's happening. Are you excited to come on Forest Mommy and Hex Sunday stream next Sunday? Of course I am. Very excited, Forest Mommy. Thank you for checking in. I will be on her channel next Sunday night, so make sure you guys all check that out. If Dave Smith doesn't run for president, who should for the LP? I don't know, man. Like I was saying before, I like Justin Amash, but he just seems so out of touch with, he's kind of like Trump, he would hate to hear me say that, but he doesn't understand what people are riled up about. He thinks just talking about like opposing coercion and being peaceful, blah, 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 is going to inspire people. And I don't think it will. And I think he's great on the issues, and he was a great representative, but yeah, he's kind of out to lunch, just like Trump is with the vaccine stuff. So I don't know. I don't think Spike Cohen's going to want to do it. But I don't know. I think Dave is the right choice. Let's see. The bigger question is, would Ron choose Rand as his running mate? I don't know why he would. But I don't know, maybe the anti-Fauci stuff, that would be interesting for sure. That's right. Jacob Winograd knows what's up. Larry Sharp. Reed Coverdale is the guy to be president of the United States. Says so in my intro every time, guys. Both Trump and DeSantis are controlled opposition. I'd agree to an extent they are. I mean, Kristi Noem was one of the only I think there There might have been other states that didn't have any mandates. I'm not sure. Ones that just didn't garner any press. But yeah, she openly said right at the beginning, we're not going to shut anything down. We're going to leave it up to private business, which is, that's what should be done. I don't know who Jacob Winograd is. He's like a Jacob Daniel 3 podcast Winograd biblical anarchist or something. I don't know. He drives me nuts though. All right, guys. Well, that's an hour right there. I'm going to close it down. One other thing. So that, there's been a controversy in the liberty movement because Dave Smith endorsed Blake Masters, who's a Republican out in Arizona, while there is a libertarian running in the primary. And I don't agree with Dave on that one. I've tried to have an open mind. So I watched Blake Masters on the Liberty Report yesterday, and I was still underwhelmed. He didn't give really strong answers, and he was kind of goaded into saying the right thing. He's not going to openly disagree with Ron and McAdams while he's on the show, but they didn't push him on like fighting wars for Israel. And they did. Dan McAdams did push him on a thread that he put out earlier saying that we should support Ukraine. And Masters said that we should not send them any more money, and he never wanted to send them weapons. I don't know how true the second part is, because the thread specifically says we need to give them the equipment they need to fight the war. Let me pull it up just so I actually get that quote right. What to do? We should supply the Ukrainians as they fight for their country. Okay, so I didn't. We should supply the Ukrainians as they fight for their country. We should support the Europeans as they get up off their knees. We should sanction Russia so that Putin and his cronies feel the consequences, and we should keep our own military out of this. So keeping our own military out of this is good, but that is not much. I mean, Joe Biden technically wants to keep our own military out of this still. So saying we should supply the Ukrainians as they fight for their country is really, really vague. And in hindsight, it's easy to say, oh, no, I just meant money. I'm not sure how true that is. And then he also said we should support the Europeans as they get up off their knees, and we should sanction Russia. So still a really kind of ugly statement to make. And then earlier he says that it was because the reason Putin invaded was because, let me see, I'll just find it here. Looking through this thread here. He basically said that it was because they showed weakness and that's why they invaded. By the way, I just did an episode with Austin Peterson about some of this, and I wanted to have him on because he kind of takes a different perspective. And his view was probably a little bit closer to Blake Masters than mine. And I did ask Austin, well, how much have we contributed to this too? I mean, we've, by doing the coup in 2014 and by, pumping weapons into Ukraine, I would argue that we provoked Russia more than Russia doing this out of its own volition and just being, an unprovoked, crazy, aggressor. I think that a lot of this was really pushed by the United States. Let's see. John Kerry-esque sentimentality around climate change and the rules-based international order doesn't work. Preening rhetoric laid on thick over Europe's still. I'm trying to find. Man, why can't I see it? Okay. European countries have been slacking, relying on America, spending next to nothing on their own militaries. Trump was right to call them out. You have to build up hard power or Russia will see you as free lunch. So I like some of what he's saying here, that, they're relying too much on America. They should basically spend more on their own militaries. I agree with that part. The second half, you have to build up hard power or Russia will see you as a free lunch. I mean, again, I would say that most of the reason for Russia's invasion was because of building up hard power and straight up bombing ethnic Russians in the Donbass region. I think that was a huge part of sparking this war. So Blake, he's not a Don Bolduc, you know, he's not an absolute retard like Don Bolduc is, but I think that libertarians should at the very least be pressuring him to be a lot better and a lot more clear about where he stands. Even if they're planning on voting Republican, like until then, I think they should be extorting him to be better. So I actually reached out to Mark Victor, who's the libertarian in that race, and hopefully I'll be having him on the podcast. And I'm going to talk about some of this stuff with him. I've met Mark before. I've been on his podcast, the Live and Let Live podcast, when I was out in Vegas. And actually at the time, we got into a little bit of an argument on his show because he was making the argument that, you know, if we want to send weapons to the gay man in Afghanistan so he doesn't get killed by the Taliban, we should be free to do that. And I was like, well, man, you're living in a fantasy land. It's not going to be you sending a package to a gay guy to defend his property. This will end up being, this will end up being orchestrated by the CIA to install some sort of puppet government. And you could say the same for Ukrainians or for Cubans or for Venezuelans or insert name of person that you want to personally protect. It's not going to happen. I mean, it's going to be used for bigger political reasons. Just like, I mean, I've talked about Iran this way. Like, they're going to use your sympathy for the Iranian woman who has to wear a hijab to try to, instate a puppet government of the CIA and the US military industrial complex. So, by the way, guys, go check out this interview with Austin. I wish I had him for a whole hour because I would have pushed back on more and gotten deeper into it, but I only had him for 30 minutes. So it was just kind of a surface level interview. But something we did talk about, and this is something I still think, I think a lot of anti-interventionist libertarians and leftists, they are just anti-America. So I do not look at the American government as some sort of unique evil. I think it's just, it's basically how every government acts. And it's a government with a crazy amount of power and a crazy amount of global influence. And so, yeah, it commits a lot of evil and a lot of atrocities. I don't think any other government in America's position would be any less evil or less atrocious. So I think if Russia had the amount of power and influence the United States does, or if China did, or if Iran did, like, name whatever government you want, I think they would be probably equally as vicious. And I think that even, like if the Nazis had gained the amount of influence that America has now, they'd probably be worse. I mean, because at least America, even though it does commit a lot of war crimes, kill a lot of innocent people, we do have a value system that, reinstate that. We have a value system that points to the importance of life and liberty to an extent. So obviously that is not what our foreign policy does. It doesn't create liberty. It kills and murders, millions of innocent people. But I don't think it's any sort of unique evil to the United States. I think if any government would be in the same, would be in the same position of influence, they would probably commit the same amount of atrocities, if not more. So in the interview with Austin, I used the example of Pearl Harbor. So I think there were tons of ways for us to avoid getting involved in World War II. We shouldn't have been sanctioning Japan. We shouldn't have been, sending tons and tons of weapons into Europe. There were all sorts of ways we could have tried to negotiate peace instead of leading us down the path of a giant war. The Treaty of Versailles was bullshit. We shouldn't have sanctioned the Germans so hard. Tons of things we could have done. But by the time Japan attacks Pearl Harbor, realistically, there's no geopolitical way out of war at that point. There just isn't. Like, let's be honest. And I feel like a lot of anti-interventionist libertarians and leftists would admit that that is true if it happened to another country. So, for example, Russia, like, we admit, yeah, what Russia is doing is geopolitically within its interests. I would agree. But to argue that the United States going to war with Japan after Japan attacks Pearl Harbor, even though it wasn't a surprise attack, even though we wanted it to happen, even though we could have avoided it in the first place, I'm not denying any of that. Once they attack Pearl Harbor, from a dumbed down geopolitical perspective, it makes no sense to not enter World War II at that point. So I feel like sometimes we're dishonest in our comparisons. Like we'll say, oh yeah, well, it makes sense for Iraq to do this or for Iran to do this or for Russia to do this, but then we don't hold the same standard when we're talking about our own country. So I think we need to be explicit. Like, look, I think war is always wrong, regardless of the geopolitical reasons, which I do. Like, I don't think that Putin's invasion of Eastern Ukraine is justified in a theoretical, like, libertarian perspective. Like, it is, you're killing innocent civilians who didn't choose to fight in either side of this war and are caught in the crossfire. That's the fact. But if you're going to talk from a geopolitical perspective, I feel like you have to do that across the board. So like the Cuban Missile Crisis, that was in our interest to say, fuck you, you can't put missiles into Cuba. To me, that makes complete sense. Like, okay, you know, I don't want to get into a war over it, but from an American perspective, that makes sense that we wouldn't want to have missiles 90 miles from the United States. Or if China were pumping weapons into Mexico or into Canada or something, the United States would have a legitimate security grievance with those types of things. So I think, I don't know if you guys read what I'm saying here, but we got to be consistent in our application of like what should be expected. And I am an anti-war anarchist. Like, I don't think war is ever acceptable, but at the same time, if I'm going to talk about, you know, some other country doing it, I want to be clear that from a dumbed down geopolitical perspective, this is why they're doing it. And the United States would probably do the same thing, if that makes sense. You know, and then my perspective, and I told Austin this during the interview, I said, look, I can't control what China or Russia or Venezuela or Cuba or Iran, name whatever country you want. I can't control what they do. I also can't control what the American government does, unfortunately, but I do pay taxes to the American government and I'm an American citizen. So I think it's more of a duty for me to try to call out the atrocities of my own government. Because at the end of the day, you know, regardless of how bad Putin is or how bad the Iranians are or how bad the Russians or the Chinese or blah, 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 whatever, regardless of how bad they are, there's nothing I can do about it. What can I control is my reaction to it and hopefully, you know, have a ripple effect of creating Americans' reactions to it and then the American government's reaction to it. Because we do still control the government to an extent. I mean, Obama wanted to go to war with Syria, and that got shut down by popular disapproval. You know, like people were against that. They're like, no, we absolutely should not go to war with, you know, with Syria. And so we didn't. We just, you know, had that civil war go on. And we didn't am I thinking Libya or Syria? I forget which one this was, but either way, there was a huge amount of disapproval that stopped us from like sending an invasion force in. And, you know, so I think we can do that now. Like, I think instead of saying, you know, instead of like trying to figure out what we could do to get Putin to stop doing what he's doing, what can we do as a reaction? We need to be able to sit down with him and talk with him. And that doesn't mean Putin is a good guy or that the Russian government is totally, you know, doing everything to protect its own people or whatever. What we got to remember is like, who are we supporting in this effort? We're supporting the Ukrainians. Like, why? I mean, especially once you like look into Zelensky and then you find out about the Azov battalion and you realize like all the dirty business the United States government has conducted. with the Ukrainian government over the last several years, you go like, why are we putting our lives on the line for this, for a border dispute between Russia and Ukraine? Why do we care about this? That's what it really comes down to me, is like, what can we do to stop this from happening and stop escalation? And then at the end of the day, why are we invested in this fight? It means absolutely nothing to us. So it's a little bit of a nuanced conversation. Go check out that interview. Let me know what you think. Let's see. We got some more comments here. If you support war, you are a retard, Kaufman. Exactly. We threatened to murder the planet if Russia parked missiles in Cuba, which, yeah, I'm saying that kind of makes sense. Like, I wouldn't want nuclear war to happen. I wouldn't support nuclear war. But when that did happen, I mean, what the fuck do you expect the United States to react with? Kind of makes sense. It's kind of like Russia right now reacting to how many weapons have been pumped into, I'm getting my countries mixed up now, Ukraine, how many weapons have been pumped in there, and like all the political shenanigans that have taken place there. If this were happening to the United States, we would react the same way. The Taliban took Afghanistan, the Mises took Reno, and Putin will take Ukraine. Yeah, I'll be honest, I don't give a fuck who wins in Ukraine. I really don't. Like, some people, I've heard arguments for both sides. Like, some people want Putin to win because then it delegitimizes NATO, which to a point I agree with that. And then other people are like, oh no, we don't want Putin to win because it's, you know, the Ukrainians are being murdered by him. And I just honestly don't care. I just want the fucking thing to end. Like, if he keeps Luhansk, Donetsk, and Kharkiv and Valparaiso, like, I don't fucking care. Or if it goes back under Ukrainian control, I really just don't care. I know that might sound callous, but I just fucking don't. It has nothing to do with me. It has nothing to do with the United States. The only thing I feel bad about is the amount of, influence and destruction that the United States has incurred over the last several years by being involved in this shit. But people who say like, well, we already fucked this up, so we need to stay over there, or we need to right the wrongs. No, we don't. We like Ron Paul said, we marched right in, we can march right out. That is exactly how I feel. Like, we fucked up Iraq big time, but just because we handed it over to the Shiites, the Dawa party that's pro-Iran, doesn't mean we should still be trying to stay there and throw it back to the people we wanted to put in power. Like, you can't fix this with more intervention. So fuck it. Like, we need to get out of there. We need to stop supporting Ukraine. And all we should be involved in is peace talks. That's it. Like, we should be trying to approach some sort of peace deal, and both sides are going to be pissed. The Russians aren't going to be happy with it, and the Ukrainians aren't going to be happy with it, but who fucking cares? Like, this is not something the world should end over. And we're rapidly approaching that position. There's 101st Airborne troops in Poland. I think it's Poland, on the Ukraine border, ready to fight Russian troops. That's fucking insane. We can't be pushing ourselves closer and closer to this disaster. Enough is enough. Let the Ukrainians and the Russians figure this out. Like, I have the same view of Palestine and Israel. Like, I know some people who watch this show probably think we should like sanction Israel and we should carve out a homeland for the Palestinians. I actually don't believe that. I think this has to be worked out between the Palestinians and the Israelis, and we need to stop fucking supporting Israel. That's my opinion. Like, I don't want anything to do with either side. And yes, we've already decimated the Palestinians. We've already fucked them over big time. That doesn't mean we can stay and like say, okay, we're going to carve out this area for the Palestinians. And, like, we just need to fucking back off, and they have to figure this out together. That's how I feel about all this shit. Same with Taiwan. Like, I don't fucking care about Taiwan. I don't care if it's part of China. I don't care if it's an independent nation. I don't fucking care. And I realize that sounds callous, but I really just don't fucking care. So bring the troops home, end these stupid fucking wars. They don't fix it for anybody. They don't fix it for us. They don't fix it for the people over there. They don't fix it for our adversaries. Like, fuck all of it. It's just insane. That's how I feel. So thanks for watching, guys. I'll try to do another one of these next week. And yeah, just keep your chin up. If you're in a state other than New Hampshire and you're going to be voting in one of these swing elections, just research what the people believe in. And if you see someone who has a little promise of libertarianism or some like liberty leaning streak, don't just get behind them. Try to pressure them to be better. That's what I think we should be doing as libertarians. And then at the end of the day, you got to make your choice, vote for whoever you want to. But at least up until then, try to extort the Republicans into being better. Or if you're in one of those rare cases where the Democrat's better than the Republican, try to extort that Democrat into being better. And then if you don't have a good option, just fucking vote libertarian or don't vote. I prefer to vote libertarian to not voting because it's kind of like a middle finger. If Maggie Hassan and Don Bolduc are pretty close and then Jeremy Kauffman gets a good number of votes, that to me is a strong middle finger saying, fuck both of you. You need to do better than this. I would do the same thing if I were in Georgia. I'd vote for Shane Hazel. I'd vote for Larry Sharp in New York. Same thing. You can just stay home and sit on the couch. It's fine. No one can force you to vote. But if there's a good libertarian candidate running, to me, it's like a strong middle finger to both sides that they're not listening to you enough. And if they want to win next time, they need to hear you out and what you have to say. All right, guys, I'm going to sign off. Thanks for watching. You're welcome for that little rant there. See some of you guys like that, but we can't solve the world's problems. It's not just that we're on the wrong side of these issues a lot of the time. Like I'd say we're on the wrong side of the Israel-Palestine thing. I don't want to be on the right side either. I just want to not be on either side. I want to be on America's side. That's the only thing we can care about. But I will catch you guys later. Bye.